Hey everyone. So it had been a little while since I did one of these for you all, and thought this would be an appropriate time to record a video for you, which is looking as we go from the Roman Republic up to the Roman Empire. Both periods famous for different reasons, and both have been influential. But in any case, we are going to see how it came about that we went from this republic to an empire, with almost certainly the most famous figure in the Roman Empire being the Julius Caesar. And yeah, just a little levity there that we show. And when I say that, I mean in terms of a member of the empire itself. Of course, Jesus was born and lived in the context of the Roman Empire, but not exactly part of it in the same way. So, okay, here we go. Let's get into it. Okay, so as Rome grew, this created some problems because as Rome grew, the civilization of Rome, the number of enslaved people grew. And by 100 BC, perhaps one-third of the population were slaves. This is obviously not so great for the slaves, but they weren't the only people impacted. Others who were impacted were small farmers, meaning farmers with small plots of land who weren't especially wealthy. This included former soldiers, and they all suffered. And there's a quote here by a leader who emerged in this time named Tiberius, who said, quote, "The savage beasts have their dens, but the men who bear arms and expose their lives for the safety of their country enjoy nothing more in it but the air and light, and wander from place to place with their wives and children." So, Tiberius partnered with his brother Gaius, and they were, or Gaius, I suppose, they were attempting to essentially gain more rights for these small farmers who they supported, and senators felt threatened by these two brothers. They felt like, oh man, we're going to lose power, and these two guys are just going to gain power, and then what kind of position will we be in? So they were both eventually killed. But they had a lot of support from these people that they had been standing up for. So when they were killed, this led to the outbreak of civil war, meaning fighting within one civilization instead of one civilization against another. So, in the context of this upheaval that was going on, as you had civil war, a lot of strife and dissatisfaction with Rome as an entity, what you had is that people no longer gave their loyalties necessarily to Rome itself as an institution. And this included soldiers who, instead of sort of swearing loyalty to Rome, their greater loyalty was to a general who they wanted to follow. So, as it says, their generals could recruit soldiers to be loyal to them with promises of land. Soldiers were no longer loyal to the Republic. And what figure emerges? Well, Julius Caesar. So, Julius Caesar didn't start out as a dictator or tyrant like that. Instead, he was part of a triumvirate that included Crassus and Pompey. Triumvirate, you can see that it starts with the prefix tri. It just basically means a group of three people who are governing. And so the other two guys being Crassus and Pompey. And this did endure for a period of time. It lasted for 10 years. But then, after 1 year as consul, Julius Caesar appointed himself the governor of Gaul, which is now France, if you want to locate that geographically. So, although he had appointed himself governor of Gaul, this didn't mean that he truly had effectively kind of subdued all of Gaul. And instead, he led military campaigns there to eventually subdue all of Gaul and bring it under Rome. And so Rome is sort of acting like an empire already, but the difference being, in terms of how we normally think of an empire, is that it is still governed ultimately at the top by a larger governing body, by the Senate, and well, by this triumvirate. And so you don't have this one emperor. And just to clarify, the Senate was still in place, but you had these three guys above it now. So the Senate still had power, but they ultimately had ceded authority to this triumvirate. Okay, so upon achieving this great military success, and he conquered all of Gaul, Caesar, Julius Caesar, earned a lot of loyalty for himself and for the ways that he endured hardship alongside his men. Well, Pompey, another member of the triumvirate, felt threatened, and he ordered Caesar to disband his army. He said, okay, you've achieved your military conquest. Now we don't need you to be running an army. You can just disband it and come back to Rome without the army. And the Senate had sided with Pompey here. They delivered this order as well. They said, yeah, we agree. This is what the country needs, or really the civilization needs. So Caesar, okay, great job, way to go in terms of conquering Gaul, but now you need to return to Rome and just be functioning as a part of the government. So to that, Caesar responds, "Are you serious?" All right, not a direct quote, not something we are aware of him actually saying, but this essentially is descriptive of Caesar's actions. He did return to Rome, but he brought his army with him. And because their loyalty at that point was much more to Caesar than to Rome, they, if he said, hey, we're going to march into Rome and conquer and set me up as ruler, well, they were going to go along with it because they trusted Caesar more than they trusted the Senate and more than they trusted Pompey. And so Caesar installed himself as ruler, and the Senate appointed him dictator. They kind of, were forced to at that point because he had all the power and all the support of most of the military. So remember, dictator was something that someone could be appointed to, intended to be a temporary thing, but at this point, it's not temporary. Caesar installs himself as dictator for life. Okay, that said, although Caesar governed as an absolute authority, he actually did do some things that were well received by even the lower members of society. And so here's a number of his reforms. First, he expanded citizenship to many people in the provinces. So those that Rome had conquered over, well, now he's actually granting citizenship to be a part of Rome that they didn't have before. Created jobs through construction of new public buildings, started colonies where people without land could now own property, and because he remembered that a lot of the support he had came from soldiers, he appreciated their loyalty, so he increased pay for soldiers. And you remember, you go back to Tiberius and Gaius, they had tried to lead an effort for more support given to these small farmers, many of whom had a background as soldiers. So Caesar did actually do things that were appreciated by a lot of, especially the kind of lower classes of society. However, when you make some people happy, you're going to make some others pretty unhappy and scared of you. And so members of the Senate had become afraid of Caesar's growing power. They wondered what he might do next. And that's when we see, yeah, no matter how good you are, you can always be replaced. So ultimately, Caesar had gone into the Senate, and at that point was kind of betrayed by some who he felt like were his friends. And this, of course, was dramatically portrayed by William Shakespeare in the play Julius Caesar. And he is stabbed, and there's a line that's not historical, but is kind of meant to represent what Caesar must have felt, which maybe his dying words to say, et tu, Brute, meaning even you, Brutus, who he felt was a friend. And so Caesar is killed, and then things start crumbling. And as they crumble, well, civil war breaks out again. And there again is some chaos, infighting, and not sure who's going to lead next. So three men band together to crush the assassins, the ones who assassinated Caesar, and they form now the second triumvirate. So we had the first triumvirate, which was Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. The second triumvirate is now Marcus Antonius, also known as Mark Antony, Marcus Lepidus, which was Caesar's general, and then Octavian Caesar, Caesar's heir. Octavian, in fact, was the grandnephew of Caesar, so his brother's grandson or sister's grandson, I'm not sure which, who he had actually adopted as a son. He thought that highly of him, and he was only 18, but had really won Caesar's favor. So, unfortunately, as seems to happen in this time, this partnership of three guys, well, it falls apart. How's that happen? Mark Antony falls in love with Cleopatra, who was queen of Egypt, and Mark Antony moves to Egypt. Well, Octavian accused Mark Antony of planning to rule Rome from Egypt, shifting the capital essentially of what is now the Roman Empire, although it still doesn't have a formal emperor yet, but it is an empire. In any case, from Egypt. Now, there may have been some jealousy at play here because Cleopatra and Octavian had previously been lovers. So, in any case, there we see Mark Antony. Oh man, I'm so in trouble when I get home because now he and Octavian are not in, they're not getting along. Of course, we're talking about a different Mark Antony, but hopefully that helps you remember the situation that developed here. And so, yep, here we go again. Laurel, Yanny, Civil War. Yet another Civil War. But now it's between Mark Antony and Octavian. And what happens? Well, Octavian defeats the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra in 31 BC. Later, Antony and Cleopatra commit suicide. Octavian now accepts the title of Augustus, meaning exalted one, and he also keeps the title of Imperator, meaning supreme commander, and this is the word from which the word emperor is derived. So when we talk about who the first true emperor of Rome was, we say Augustus or Octavian because he actually assumed that title for himself. Previously, you had someone like Caesar, but ruling as a dictator, and not for all that long. But then eventually, through the series of events we just talked about, we do see Octavian rise to that position and become known as emperor. And now Rome is an empire ruled by one man. We'll hear a little more about Augustus together in class. Okay, and under Augustus, we see the development of this period that we call the Pax Romana, meaning Roman peace. So you have this vast empire of 3 million square miles, 80 million people, and 1 million people in the city of Rome, which in the time, to think about a city of 1 million people is pretty incredible. And even today, we would call a city of 1 million a pretty big city. There are obviously plenty that are much bigger than that. But this is a pretty impressive thing that we've got going. It's held together through some different means, including efficient government and able rulers. And Augustus does beautify Rome with impressive looking buildings. All right, agriculturally and with trade, about 90% of people in the empire engaged in farming. They produced locally, but for their local consumption, local trade, but also traded really throughout the empire, which is something that's able to happen because of this big infrastructure that you have. And the key features of infrastructure are common coinage, the denarius, which was used throughout the empire. Common coinage obviously makes it much easier to do commerce and to have an understanding of what things are supposed to cost. And you had Roman roads, which extended all the way up to Persia and even to southern Russia. So being around the Mediterranean was really helpful, trade being able to be done using ships, and then this vast road network, some of which is actually still in use today. I actually well, I studied in Spain, and while I was there, I went to Cordoba, and there is a bridge that cars drive on today that was built by the Romans. That's pretty cool to think about, right? I mean, we think about things that old that you would just kind of preserve and really want to protect and not think about using. Well, they use it. Like, yeah, it's fine. It's still a useful bridge. So, pretty wild. Anyway, this is our introduction to Rome. In class, we'll look a little more deeply at what life in Rome really looked like. But hopefully, this has helped make sense of how we went from a republic to an empire.